President Trump's vow to take his tariff fight to the Supreme Court after a federal appeals court Friday struck down most of the tariffs imposed by the White House, including the Liberation Day tariffs imposed in April, as well as earlier tariffs against Canada, Mexico, and China. The decision upholds an earlier ruling by the U.S. Court of International Trade. Its ruling, the appeals court called tariffs, quote, a core congressional power. The White House argued the president can unilaterally impose tariffs based on powers granted by the 1977 International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEPA, which has historically been used to impose sanctions. But its decision, the appeals court wrote, quote, it seems unlikely Congress intended in enacting IEPA to depart from its past practice and grant the president unlimited authority to impose tariffs. The statute neither mentions tariffs or any of its synonyms, nor has procedural safeguards that contain clear limits on the president's power to impose tariffs, end quote. The tariffs will remain in effect until October. Trump wrote on Truth Social, quote, if allowed to stand, this decision would literally destroy the United States of America, unquote. The decision encompasses two different cases that challenge the tariffs, one brought by a group of U.S. states led by Oregon, and the other brought by a group of businesses. In a moment, we'll speak with Dan Rayfield, the Attorney General of the state of Oregon. But first to Washington, D.C., to speak with Neal Katyal. He argued the case for businesses. He was previously acting Solicitor General in the Obama administration and has argued over 50 cases before the Supreme Court. He's also a law professor at Georgetown University. Neal, welcome back to Democracy Now! You've called this decision, quote, a win for our Constitution and founders' vision of what America is. Lay out what happened, what exactly this decision means.
Yeah, I think it's a sweeping decision that, unequivocally rebukes President Trump's idea that he can impose tariffs on American consumers on his own without the approval of the Congress. Our Constitution in Article 1, Section 8 expressly gives the power to tariff to Congress, not to the president. And so the president basically tried to do this on his own, saying, well, Congress in 1977 passed a law called IEPA, which is about emergency economic powers, and that gives me the power to have an unlimited tariff. And as you just heard, the court just resoundingly rejected that idea. It doesn't mention the word tariffs in it, and Congress has never given carte blanche authority to the president to tariff the American consumer. And the Nonpartisan Tax Foundation has said that after studying President Trump's tariffs, that they are the largest increase on American consumers, the largest tax increase on American consumers since Bill Clinton in 1993. And of course, that was done through Congress. So that's simply what the opinion says. If the president really thinks these tariffs are so important, as you all just read, that the country will be destroyed without them, his choice is easy. Just go to the Congress and get them approved.
Has the Congress delegated to the president, as in your reading of the law up till now?
Yeah, so they certainly didn't delegate that kind of unlimited power. When Congress gives the president power over tariffs, they always have hard and fast limits. So, for example, Section 122 of the Trade Act says the president has a temporary power to increase tariffs for 150 days by 15%. What did President Trump do? He increased tariffs 50%, 150% indefinitely. And that's a kind of coloring outside of the lines that the court found so problematic last week in its decision.
And why did the court give only 45 days for the government to go to the Supreme Court? Typically, it's not a 90-day stay.
Yeah, we were very grateful to see that the court on its own did that. And I think it's, obviously, they have their reasons, but my guess is it's because they recognize the importance of this issue and that it should be decided quickly. I'm privileged to represent a group of small businesses who are struggling every day to understand what these rules are, how important, what these tariffs are likely to be. Will there be, refunds on these illegal tariffs in the future? All sorts of really difficult questions. And I think the Court of Appeals did something really good by saying, look, government, normally you have 90 days to go to the Supreme Court. We're only giving you 45.
Explain overall what tariffs would be lifted. Explain how this works, this timeline, and what do you expect the Supreme Court to do?
Well, so the president has two choices right now. One is he could do what the court last week said he should do, which is to go to Congress and seek their approval. It's our hope that he will do that, and then Congress can decide. I note that President Trump tried to get approval before when he was president the first time, and Congress said no. But that's a debate that I think the American people should have, that the American Congress should have. The other option is, of course, he could go to the U.S. Supreme Court. He could try as early as this week. And the court could hear the case pretty quickly in a matter of a month or two, and then resolve the case pretty quickly. So I think those are the paths that are available right now to the administration. But right now, these tariffs have been declared illegal and unconstitutional by the nation's second highest court.
And how do you expect the Supreme Court to rule, given the six-judge conservative majority on the court?
Well, I'm not going to predict how the court will rule. We think the case here is overwhelming, but I've heard these questions all the time in my past cases, which I've litigated in the Supreme Court. Oh, the court is too conservative or something. I'm reminded, I think I was even on this program when I argued Moore versus Harper, which was a case challenging the Republican National Committee's theory of the independent state legislature doctrine, which, if they had won that case, would have entrenched Republican rule for perhaps decades. And everyone said, oh, the Supreme Court, they're in the pocket of Republicans and so on. And, I never thought that was right. I thought that the Supreme Court would look at this by understanding what is the original intent of the Constitution when it comes to elections. And lo and behold, 6-3, the Supreme Court rejected that Republican theory there. I think a similar result is very possible here. Again, I'm not here to predict what the court will do, but I think if they look at, as I suspect they will, the original understanding of the Constitution, the fact that our founders cared so much about the taxation and tariff power to put it in expressly Congress's control and strip the president of any power over that, because they knew that every king and despot always wants to use the tax power. I mean, think Boston Tea Party, think so many other things in our revolutionary history. The idea that the president could come along and just impose taxes and tariffs on the American people on his own would have turned the founders over in their graves. So we are going to make that case to the Supreme Court should this become a Supreme Court case, and we are optimistic in the strength of that argument.
Neal Katyal, we want to thank you so much for being with us. Law professor at Georgetown University, argued the case before the court, which has now struck down Trump's tariffs, but they can remain until October. We will, of course, continue to follow the story, as we will turn right now to Dan Rayfield, Oregon Attorney General. He's leading the multi-state lawsuit against Trump's tariffs. He's joining us from Salem, Oregon. Oregon Attorney General, thanks so much for being with us. You're the one who brought this case. Explain why you brought it and the significance of the ruling of the court.
Yeah, I think when people think about tariffs or you hear tariffs, that word in your community, you don't feel that that's something that's impacting you as a person just walking through your community. In fact, if you listen to President Trump, he claims and brags that all of these costs are being paid by foreign businesses. And the fact is that when you look at it, when you look at people that we trust, Goldman Sachs, all of these others, JP Morgan, they show that about 70 to 80% of those tariffs are paid by Americans. And so when you thought about the importance of this case, especially when cost of living is such a huge thing for Americans right now, and you see a president using and abusing an emergency power that had never been used for tariffs before, it was a real easy decision for us to move forward. Here in Oregon, I was hearing from businesses that were having their products removed off their shelves in Canada. We're seeing the cost of goods that the state was purchasing increasing. And it was just only the beginning when we started this journey back in February and really starting evaluating the impact. So it made absolute sense for us to get involved and say, hey, Mr. President, if you want to do tariffs, that's great. Just do them the right way. Do them the way that Congress intended.
And the first court to hear this case was the Court of International Trade in New York, where there were two Republican judges, yet the court voted unanimously against these tariffs. What's your sense of how this will continue to work its way up the judicial chain here?
Yeah, and the one thing that I never got when I became Attorney General was a crystal ball, so just know that. But as you look at this, I think what people should find interesting that you have 11 judges that have all ruled that the manner in which the president has tried to implement his tariffs is unconstitutional. It went beyond the safeguards that Congress intended for consumers. They put these sideboards. Congress put sideboards in place to protect consumers, to protect all of us, to protect our businesses, our economy. And the president doesn't want to use this, so we went around them. So it wasn't surprising that you had Republican or judges appointed by Republicans saying, hey, you went too far here. This isn't what Congress intended. This isn't what our Constitution intended. We had one judge in the Federal Circuit Court of Appeals that actually ruled, appointed by a Republican, that ruled that these were unconstitutional as well. So I don't think that these are really Democratic or Republican leaning issues. I mean, these are foundational democratic principles that we're trying to uphold.
I wanted to turn to the White House trade advisor, Peter Navarro, speaking about the tariffs lawsuit on Monday.
This case is arguably the single most important economic case that has ever come before the Supreme Court. If the lower court's ruling is upheld, President Trump has correctly said that will be the end of the United States. I think we're in very good shape. Bottom line is we're optimistic that the Supreme Court will rule on this. We don't have to, the tariffs will remain in place at least through October and perhaps beyond until the Supreme Court rules on this.
So that's Peter Navarro, the top trade advisor to President Trump, the convicted felon who was pardoned by Trump. Dan Rayfield, Oregon Attorney General, your response?
I would just say I wish I had the moral flexibility to make such bold, inaccurate statements to the American public the way that the Trump administration does. It's absolutely wild to sit there and say that that is going to destroy America. I would argue giving all of the power to tax, because that's what these are. These are a tax on American people, and giving all of that power to the president without the ability of Congress to curb it is more un-American than anything that is going on right now. This case is incredibly important for the American people and our autonomy and Congress's autonomy. It's wild, the things they say. But again, this isn't an administration that truly lives on a hyperbole and making wild statements like this. It's just factually inaccurate. And again, remember, like as we're going through the stores, you're seeing it right now. The prices for school supplies. My son starts school tomorrow. The prices of clothes. These things are absolutely increasing every week in our stores. Incredibly wild for them to make statements like this. And remember, and that's the other thing, if you do care about trade, if you do care about how these things are being implemented, remember that no other president has needed to do tariffs this way. Every other president has used the regular statutes. In fact, Donald Trump used the other statutes when he was implementing tariffs. It's been done before. We've entered into successful trade agreements lawfully, constitutionally, the way that the Constitution and Congress intended.
And Attorney General, you mentioned that these tariffs are in effect a tax, but it's also a regressive tax, isn't it? Hitting more the folks on the lower income strata of American society.
Oh, absolutely. And this is what Republicans are trying to do to us right now. On one hand, you see this big, beautiful bill, and I don't even like calling it that, where they're yanking away health care benefits from Americans. They are yanking away food assistance benefits on the one hand. And on the other hand, they are passing this hidden regressive tax that's impacting vulnerable Americans more than the wealthy. It is an entire reshaping of the American economy that's going on right now. And the wild thing that is this, they are doing it without congressional approval when it comes to these tariffs. Again, I really think we have to start calling them regressive taxes because tariffs makes it feel like foreign businesses are paying.
Dan Rayfield, I want to thank you so much for being with us. I want to ask you one unrelated question. In our next segment, we're going to be going to the border to talk about the court blocking the Trump administration from deporting some almost 700 unaccompanied Guatemalan children. But I wanted to ask you about Oregon being a sanctuary state and what exactly that means. Oregon Governor Tina Kotek pushed back against claims from the Trump administration that Oregon's obstructing federal immigration enforcement efforts because of its sanctuary law. Can you talk about what that means for Oregon and the level of cooperation between ICE agents, these raids, and local and state authorities?
Yeah, really simply put, think in Oregon, we've had sanctuary state laws since the 80s, right? They have coexisted between 7 presidential administrations, and they've coexisted peacefully. And really the idea and the spirit behind our sanctuary laws here in Oregon is that we want our local law enforcement doing the things that keep our communities safe. We don't want them doing immigration, and we want people to feel safe being able to talk to public safety, local law enforcement about the things that are going on in their communities, right? That keeps us all safe. When you've got a victim of crime, we want witnesses to feel comfortable going to our courts to be able to testify to keep our communities safe. And so we've enacted these laws, and they were enacted in the 80s. And in Oregon, they were nearly unanimous. Republicans and Democrats overwhelmingly supported these policies. And so it's a relatively new thing to have the federal government come in and try and effectively force us to use state resources to effectuate immigration laws. And that's what these laws are designed to protect and prohibit. They've been upheld in Oregon in the past as being constitutional. And so we expect that to continue moving forward. Right now, there's a policy disagreement between the federal government and the states about how they want to interact. But I feel very confident in saying that Oregonians want their law enforcement going after the essential public safety things, burglary, murder, the big crimes in our communities to make sure that we're keeping our community safe. And we want people in Oregon feeling comfortable and safe talking to law enforcement and going to our courthouses to testify to keep our community safe.
Thanks for watching Democracy Now! On YouTube. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to make sure you never miss a video. And for more of our audience-supported journalism, go to democracynow.org, where you can download our news app, sign up for our newsletter, subscribe to the daily podcast, and so much more.